Now, Afghanistan, I think, is heading in the right direction, with the exception of the Pashtun Belt. Even parts of the Pashtun Belt are heading in the right direction. The big problem is not anything that's happening in the military context. It's the government. The Karzai government is a disaster. It's become an increasing disaster since 2006. Basically, I think our end goal in Afghanistan is not just to provide a stable, good enough state that isn't a haven for al-Qaeda. We need to leave Afghanistan as a country that's out of it's working its way out of the culture of poverty. That means a functioning, relatively non-corrupt government down to the local levels, continued good GDP growth, literacy rates that are at least double what they are now. Literacy is very, very low, and the birth rate has got to fall towards a replacement level. Now it's something like 8 live births for women. That's way too high.
So we need to accomplish all of that stuff to succeed?
Well, unless we want 160 million Afghans in another 70 years.
It just seems like we've got our work cut out for us. But before I ask you kind of how we do that, one thing that occurs to me is that, you say, well, we're succeeding in many of the non-Pashtun areas, and that's fine, but the fact is that the action is in the Pashtun areas, right? That's the test. That's where we have to meet the test, because that's where the Taliban are. That's the part that bleeds over into Pakistan, right?
Well,
in this potentially incendiary way.
That's true, but remember, there was no crisis in 2004, 2005. We're dealing with a very complex mix of factors here, and one, the elephant in the room, of course, is Pakistan, which has a population at least 7 or 8 times the size of Afghanistan. So in a sense, you could get Afghanistan completely right, and it could still founder if Pakistan falls apart.
In fact, can I ask you one crazy? I'm sure it's a crazy question, but it seems to me. Didn't the Taliban start being a problem in Pakistan precisely because we won the Afghanistan war and chased them into Pakistan? Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who make the quip that we simply pushed the problem 1,500 miles to the east.
Yeah, we pushed it into a nation that has nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so here's the crazy part of the question. I'm sure you'll say it's crazy, but if the worst case scenario is the Taliban, or starting some sort of, is nuclear weapons winding up in the hands of people whose hands we don't want them in? Could it be that the less than worst scenario would be for the Taliban to come back into Afghanistan and have that nation and at least not have nuclear weapons and get distracted away from Pakistan, or is it your view that invariably the power in Afghanistan would only aid their ability to disrupt Pakistan?
Well, I think that's a bit like saying, well, should we just give the mafia, Long Island or Newark or something like that? So.
Well, if the nuclear weapons were in the Midwest and you had to choose between the two, I'd say, keep them in Long Island, yes.
Well,
now, I'm talking about, it's a hypothetical, assuming you accept that the goal of just avoiding the worst case scenario, but the question that even with that premise is probably crazy, is would it stabilize Pakistan to give the Taliban Afghanistan? That's crazy,
of course
right?
Not. Yeah, no, I don't think that makes any sense. Look.
What's wrong with the argument? What's wrong if they got chased into Pakistan and started occupying themselves by creating havoc in Pakistan, and if they would actually go back into Afghanistan if they were running Afghanistan, what's wrong with the logic that would actually tend to have a pacifying effect on Pakistan?
Well, for one thing, they came out of Pakistan in the first place. We helped to grow them, as is well known, in the jihad years. We provided funding for groups. When I was first in Afghanistan in May of 2002, I visited Shibaghan Prison, which was in the area controlled by General Dostum in northern Afghanistan, and I wanted to interview some of the prisoners who had been taken in the celebrated incident where Mike Spann was killed. The prisoners were, contrary to popular opinion, were not housed in inhumane conditions. They were quite willing to talk with me, and lo and behold, the obstacle I ran into was that some of them only spoke Urdu. They were from Pakistan. At that point, I barely spoke Dari, but my translator spoke Pashto, and they were all either Pashto or Urdu speakers, and they were either from the border provinces or actually from Pakistan. They had come all the way from Pakistan to do jihad in Afghanistan and got taken prisoner. So, I don't see that giving them, if that were even our decision to make, which it's not, because the people of Afghanistan have that decision to make.
But the fear is that if we left Afghanistan, the Taliban would sweep back in and take Afghanistan.
No, I think that's a not very well informed view. I don't think any Afghan thinks that either.
What would happen? What would happen if we left Afghanistan, in your view?
If we left Afghanistan, I would imagine one of the things that would happen is there would be a coup against the Karzai government. I don't think Karzai would survive.
That wouldn't necessarily be a terrible thing.
Yeah, and I think that the Afghan National Army would defend its country. The Army is a pretty respected institution, a pretty good institution. There are problems with the Army, but they're not massive problems. They're curable problems that are developmental issues, not structural issues. And very patriotic. As an Afghan said...
Well, then why don't we just do that? I mean, that doesn't sound like that bad an outcome.
It's not. It would not be the catastrophe, I think, that is envisioned, but it would mean that Afghanistan would have a much, much longer and slower haul in getting to where we want it to be. It's not clear that an Afghanistan that is involved in a low-level, simmering civil war, the parts of the Pashtun belt against the rest of the country, is a very good situation either.
Because that could become a breeding ground for terrorists, or a place, or what?
Yeah, I think it's disruptive of both Pakistan and Afghanistan. People on the border really, they do see each other as and themselves as being either Afghans or Pakistanis, but it's kind of one area, just as people who live in Detroit go to Canada to see a movie, or people in Buffalo, New York. There are borders where people have friends on both sides. They use resources on both sides. Can't expect things to go well in one area if they're going terribly in another. But